Remember, we love you all. So before we move on, let me introduce our moderator, JC Ko, who is the growth partner at Dentsu Taiwan, and of course our speaker, Christine Tsai, CEO and founding partner at 500 Global.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Fireside Chat with Christine Tsai. I still remember when I was in Silicon Valley, Bay Area, Singularity University, I was having a very great Fireside Chat experience by Dr. Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis. So I really enjoyed that kind of event. So it's really my honor to be here to join this Fireside Chat with Christine Tsai, the CEO and founding partner of the multi-stage venture capital firm 500 Global. Since founding in 2010, she's grown the firm to more than $2.5 billion in assets under management. They have backed more than 2,700 companies in 80 plus different countries, including companies like Canva, like GitLab, Talkdesk, Grab, and more. So you've been investing in startups across stages around the world, including Taiwan since 2012. Tell us more about your work in Taiwan, maybe. Yeah. So you've been investing in a lot of startup and you have a great experience in Taiwan. So talk about that.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, JC. And I'm really excited to be here. The last time I was here, aside from a layover, was March 2020. So it's been too long, but I just got in a couple of days ago, so I'm really excited to be back in Taiwan. In terms of 500's work in Taiwan, and I do see some very familiar faces in terms of some of our portfolio. Our first investment in a Taiwan company was actually in 2011. Into Pic Collage. Is there Pic Collage for anyone here? Oh, yes. Oh, okay. I saw Joanne and then I said, okay, awesome, okay. So that was our first Taiwan company. And then since then, over the past 10 years, we've invested in close to 70 companies in Taiwan. And about 20 of those were just in the last couple of years. So you can see just how much our pace has picked up because of our efforts here on the ground that Tony's been leading with the team. And it's also an example of where we have seen a lot of opportunity in terms of how the market has started to grow and mature. And because we have been investing in both the US and around the world since the very beginning, hence our name, we know that it takes a lot more than just writing a check or capital for a company to really grow, especially at the earliest stages. That was a lot of how our firm was built, because in 2010, the costs to start a company were coming down. You didn't need to raise a $4 million Series A just to pay your server costs. You could start a company pretty quickly, but what companies really needed was help to understand how to get distribution, how to build a team, education, and a lot of those resources are just not as accessible outside of the US, outside of Silicon Valley. Now in 2023, it's a little bit easier, but even then, I think that's why we have this type of event like a Founder Spring. And for 500 Global, what we have really done in Taiwan is, in addition to investing in companies, we've also run programs in partnership with TTA, which has obviously been a great partner. We've been running like accelerator programs and boot camps, really designed to help companies understand how to grow, how to fundraise, and really be connected to a global network. And that's something only 500 can really do. And we feel that our work is still, it's not over. There's still a long road ahead. But as you all know, you're in it for the long game, and venture is very much about the long-term commitment. So we're quite excited about how we've seen the companies mature.
Wow, that's amazing. So right now in 2023, the world is growing bigger and bigger. We have a larger and larger market. Right now we have 8 billion potential users for every startups. So beyond Taiwan, what do you think about that? Like you see as being the characteristic of the successful venture ecosystem. What's the key feature or key part? Yeah.
So I think if you think about starting with Silicon Valley, so with Silicon Valley, I think a lot of times we forget that it has had many decades to develop into the ecosystem that it is today, and a lot of markets may have different parts of those ecosystems are still growing, and you really need all parts. So certainly you start with the founder talent, deal flow, and sorry, that's the investor term. I don't know if founders like hearing it being treated called that, but basically talented founders building companies. And then you have investors like venture capital, typically, that's what invests in these types of companies. But even within venture capital, you will need at all stages, early stage, Series A, growth stage, late stage. And then you also need to think about how do these companies eventually get liquidity? So like, is the market, like, do they go public? What is the M&A appetite environment like? And then the cycle begins again when these companies get liquidity, founders get liquidity, they go on, build new companies, or they create wealth for the employees, and they go and become angel investors, they start funds. So as you can see, it all kind of goes in cycles. And then, of course, especially in more nascent markets, the government plays a huge role in terms of policies, regulations, helping funding, helping it be easier for startups to grow. So all of those things, as well as global capital being a big thing. You can be a small market, but there's still a lot of potential to either be a global company or have global capital coming in and out, and the other way as well. So those, I think, are some of the key parts, and we've seen this time and time again through all of the 80 plus countries that we have invested in, as well as the key markets that we have people on the ground in now. A lot of times, especially when the government is really pushing to bring entrepreneurship to the market for economic growth, job creation, they focus on a couple of those things, but really to get the complete ecosystem, it does take quite a bit of time, but yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm a little bit curious as a professor in Taiwan University. So I'm always advocate or like pushing the boundary of the cutting edge technology and in the startup area or in the universities. So Taiwan has a strong track record of producing high quality engineers. Especially we have like TSMC, we have Trend Micro, we have a lot of great company here located or start from Taiwan. But it could be difficult to produce like a new kind of talents like from the AI or machine learning, data science. Do you think that's like you already talk about like government, but do you think that's good enough for Taiwan government or Taiwan like educational system where really did a great job, good enough to cultivate the environment or the system for us to, or for the startups to attract more talent or young talent from like new kind of a new wave like generative AI or like new kind of a new type of regenerative company. Do you think that's good enough, or is there any like other things that we should still consider and do better?
Well, I think, like I mentioned before, everything about like either building a company, being a venture capital investor, really wanting to transform the economy or market, it's very much a long-term game. So I definitely don't think that's enough.
Yeah.
I don't know how everyone else feels because you're on the ground here, but I'm sure you would say the same, that you're in it, you're living it, you're building companies or you're investing, and there's been a lot of change, certainly, especially in the last few years, but there's still so much more opportunity in terms of how much this market can grow. I think one of the big, at least from my American perspective, the big benefits of COVID was that I think Taiwan was pushed even more into the global stage because of how you handle the pandemic. Of course, everyone succumbed to it, so it is what it is. But but as well as some of the more controversial things that are happening around like chips and kind of semiconductors. Taiwan has a very big role in that. So I think much like other smaller markets that have gotten a lot of visibility, there's a lot of opportunity for Taiwan to be even further on the global stage, as well as companies from Taiwan being really truly global brands and companies.
Yeah, that's great. So we're just talking about something like locally, but we should think something like globally. So on the topics of components of success, what other challenges or opportunities do you see for Taiwan startup ecosystem or other places startup ecosystem? For example, like what I mean is what changes have you seen in the innovation ecosystem since that first investment in, and what have you seen over the past 3 years working with TTA, and also you have been involving in the investment in Taiwan since 2011. What have you seen? A lot of change, or like something not changed, something has changed? Yeah.
There's definitely been quite a lot of change. So I'll start with the founders and the companies. There's a lot more companies being started. There's a lot more founders. And I think some of this is not unique just to Taiwan. I think we see this in a lot of markets as technology is growing and has a global impact. I think that has started to inspire a lot of people to make different career choices, not join a very established company, but take a bigger risk, start a company. I think in some markets it's still more acceptable or not acceptable to do that in terms of like culturally that's something to be very aware of. That it's seen as too risky, or if you fail, then you're done, your career is over. So that needs to stop in order to really make this encourage more people to start companies. So definitely on the founder side, we've seen tremendous growth in terms of just more of that risk taking. And then I think we were fortunate to have the support of NDF, NDC, and I think that's a very big role in terms of the government providing funding either to managers, fund managers, or directly to companies, as well as providing incentives to make it easier to start a company in Taiwan or encourage global companies to set up shop here. I think there's been a lot of efforts that we've seen the government play here, especially in the last few years. And then I think with a lot of the partners that we've worked with, of course, TTA and others, there's a big push to bring managers both within Taiwan but all around to come to Taiwan and help invest in companies. And I think that's been really a lot of that activity has increased even more in the last few years. So
yeah, that's super cool because back to the 2011 or 2013 in Taiwan, like innovation, or I cannot even spell like entrepreneurship, right? So right now we have a TDA, we have a lot of supporting system or supporting vehicles, and also of course for 500 global, 500 Taiwan here. So as for the tech trends, what are the tech trends or specific sector trends you're seeing, and how can Taiwan could play an innovation role in those trends, like generative AI or like Web3 or like a lot of new trends? What kind of trends you're seeing right now?
Yeah, I mean, generally, of course, AI and generative AI is what. It does not seem to have gotten the memo about falling valuations. It's kind of in its own world. So there's a lot of interest there with what the how much it'll be disruptive, and so I think definitely AI. Web3 is obviously been a little bit maybe less hot than before, but I think in the long term there's still a lot of opportunity for blockchain companies and that technology to prevail. It's just, it is going through its own cycles, I think. So, and I think we've seen this for any sector that gets really hot. There's a lot of FOMO and frenzy around it, and then there's and then it kind of falls out, and then in the long run, we've seen this even in the dot-com era, like with the dot-coms growing and crashing, and so, but I think, there's still great opportunity there. And then I think, we still, for us, we do try to lean into what we think are going to be the next big opportunities and sectors, but we also don't want to forget that there's still a lot of really big problems to be solved that aren't flashy. So, we still continue to invest in sectors that we've done very well in, which is enterprise SaaS, B2B, developer ops. To some extent, we've invested in a number of consumer companies. I think we have different standards for that. But in emerging markets, consumer is still a very big category. Fintech, obviously, is quite... we've been investing in fintech before. I think it was called fintech. And then I think one other category that's maybe more relevant now than it was ever is around sustainability tech. You can call it climate, or it's had a lot of different names, but that certainly is a big need. And we've seen a lot of companies try to tackle it from certain angles around either sustainable technologies or companies. And then in terms of Taiwan specifically, we have seen a lot of really, and we've invested in, I see some of them. I've signed a lot of documents and I recognize the names. I haven't met everybody. So when I see the name tag, I signed your document. So I still sign every single investment document. So that's really me signing every single one. If anyone was curious if it was like a bot or someone else on the team. But I think for Taiwan specifically, we have seen a lot of really great companies building. They are not AI companies per se, but they are building with AI kind of at the forefront, which I think is the big differentiator versus just being an AI company. You can slap AI and a lot of people are doing that. But I think for us, what's really interesting is how are you using AI technologies for the bigger problem that you're solving. Definitely one other key area that I'll note, which is a good nod to how Taiwan is developing as an ecosystem, is B2B SaaS. Usually, we started investing in Taiwan early, and then we started investing in Latin America, Southeast Asia, Middle East, like very early on. And I think when we start to see companies that are more in the enterprise SaaS fields, that's a sign to us that the market is starting to mature and support those types of companies. Usually it starts with consumer first, and then SaaS comes at some point. But the fact that we are starting to see a number of SaaS companies in Taiwan, and we have invested in a couple of them as well, that's an area we're looking at very closely as well.
Yeah. Are there any next future stuff or next buzzword you're seeing for crazy new technology like space technology, bio, or robotics, or any new stuff you're seeing, or almost all the area you already talk about? Is there any a secret new thing or next wave
I don't know if I would say no. I mean, I think some of the things that you mentioned that are kind of like a moonshot, deep tech, I think that will be actually quite interesting, because we've gone through this wave over the last 10 years, which was this historic, 10, 15 years of a very historic bull market, huge growth in venture funding and valuations, and there was this huge excess over the last few years that is now coming to bear. So it's a really painful time right now in tech, with valuations, funding, layoffs, all kinds of really gnarly things. And I think that people are also pretty fatigued about certain types of companies that just seem like they're catering to the 1%. I mean, there's still value in those companies, but I think for many, there's a really strong desire to invest in the next big thing. That's why I think AI is so interesting to people, because it seems like AI is not new. We've invested in AI companies since 2011, 2013, whatever. But now that it seems more accessible in terms of the consumer layer, now it's becoming, everyone's going crazy over it. But things like space or
neuroscience,
spatial computing, I don't know. I don't know if they're quite buzzwords yet, but there is definitely some intrigue, I think, around newer technologies that are like deep tech. I think there was one person I was talking to that said they're what was it? I don't know if it was space. It was some other, I can't remember. But
we have some technology startup here in Taiwan, making some component for the space field, like a motor, something like that. So I think those kind of area would highly potential, but we'll see, right?
Yeah. I think also if you think about categories like AI or anything, a good way to think about maybe some of those opportunities is what is it that powers that? So, if with the rise of ChatGPT and all of these things, that takes a huge amount of compute.
Yeah.
People may or may not think about like what does it take to run those things. So when they think about like the AI infrastructure, kind of like the gold rush in the 1800s in California, what were the belts and the picks and tools that the gold rush people used. So that's another thing that is quite interesting. Like when we see some trend happening, underlying infrastructure, what's going to power that?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's someone will come up with a buzzword, but
Yeah, so as for the situation for the current era, like even though sometimes as a startup or entrepreneur, even though we are doing great progress, a nice market, but maybe sometimes the economy maybe not so well. So I want to ask, like, what are some of the macroeconomic trends you are seeing globally, like for economy part?
I mean, in summary, I feel like there's very significant volatility and uncertainty. So it's kind of not always a fun time. I think I can rattle them off. There's obviously a lot of concerns about inflation and concerns about if there's a recession happening, and there's always like, is there a recession or not a recession? But I think there's a lot of challenges there. I think I mentioned earlier that with COVID, I still feel like we're seeing some kind of like a after effects of it because of the light that it shines on a lot of the weaknesses in society. So there's a huge impact obviously on supply chain because of the enormous amount of funding and craziness that was 2021. Now there's a big drop from that because of like us coming out of COVID and I think that's also had a huge negative impact on things. And so there's a lot. Geopolitical instability is a huge concern. There's some concern about how much are we actually globalization is increasing or decreasing. You can see it from both ways, but I think with the macro trends, there's I think technology is generally it lives through that, and innovation doesn't stop. Obviously, we're seeing this with what's going on right now with AI and such. But I think macro trends is so hard to control, right? So I think if you're trying to figure out how to control it, I mean, no. But it's more like how do you adapt to it as a founder or as an investor, and just remember that this is a very painful time, especially for tech, but the best companies will come out of 2023, 2024, the toughest years. We've seen this time and time again. I'm sure Jameson will talk about it. He's been through many cycles as well. So I think that's one thing that's really encouraging. Tech has been through many cycles like this. I very much see this as a cycle. It's a market cycle.
Yeah, so the last question is I'm also very curious about like the founders. Like sometimes people say that as a firm, as a venture capital, you're not only investing as a company or a startup, you're also investing, or even more, you're investing the founders. So I would like to ask, like, what are some of the things you look for in startup founders?
Yeah, definitely. So at the earliest stages, there's not a lot to diligence. So the team is like by far the most important thing. So and we, having backed more than 2,700 companies, we've also seen even more than that in terms of like through our accelerators or just through investment. So I think some of the characteristics we see are actually pretty relatively consistent market to market. So it's not like we look for completely different things in Taiwan versus Mexico versus Middle East. But a few things that really come to mind. One thing we definitely look for is the founder's ability to execute, their speed. And this is very apparent in just like how quickly they can move in terms of like trying things, even if it fails or doesn't go the right way. We've definitely seen founders who kind of think about things too much, and your time is really your enemy when you're running an early stage company. Like the faster you can keep going, learn from your mistakes, keep going, like that's really critical. So speed. Secondly is around. Is really around. Sorry. The second is really around kind of that growth mindset. So I think that it's interesting. One of our Tony and my partners, Kylie Ng, who runs our Southeast Asia practice, he's been going. If you follow him on LinkedIn, he's been going through writing these like thought pieces. But one of the things he does mention is around that growth mindset. So as a founder, you're going to fail a lot. You're going to get rejected like all the time by investors, by potential hires, by customers. So I think with every no you get, it's an opportunity to learn. It can also harden you, thinking I hate everybody and screw this. But I think again, as an early stage company, you're going to get this a lot. So I think the more you have that growth mindset and try to learn and either turn those no's into yeses or just see how that can help you pivot the company is really key. I can tell you I've been through a lot of rejection in the 13 years of 500, and some of them were really, really painful rejections or just getting no's. But I think you can either use that to fuel you further, or you can just stop. And hopefully you know which is the right path to take. And then I think the third is really around having conviction around what you're building, because similar as number two. Most people will probably tell you you're going to fail, like I don't get this company. The more that you really have a clear picture and vision of what you're building, and true conviction, especially during the hard times, is key, because that's how you inspire building your team. And then the last thing I think is something that is, especially in this environment, even more important, is that ability to build trust with everybody you work with, all your stakeholders, your investors, your team, your co-founders. I think a lot of that is really lacking, and I think especially in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of headlines around from all angles, not just companies and founders, but certainly a lot of trust that's been broken, some really spectacular failures. But all of this comes down to people really want to be able to build trust with their companies and with their investors. It goes both ways. So I think the more that you really pay attention to that in terms of building trust, and then with customers as well. Consumer confidence is at a very low right now, so I think there's huge opportunity for founders who really prioritize the relationships and building trust with their various stakeholders. Now, in terms of how do we assess all of this with early stage founders, we have some sense of this based on what we've seen, but I think the opportunity that we have is to work with these founders through our programs, being a little bit more hands-on in an accelerator or whatnot. And so we see a lot of things that other investors don't. And I will say also, last thing is, these 4 things does not mean your company will win. But based on what we've seen, certainly these are some common patterns.
Yeah, that's super great. So I think this is today's fireside chat with by JC and Christine, and I hope you guys are loving it, and also I believe we all learned a lot. So thank you everyone, and we have next session, and we're back to the Erica. Yeah, thank you.